side property. The water comes from the east, goes west, goes through the swell. So that takes care of that problem.
What about the
parking
parking
lot?
lot?
Water coming in the property than there ever was. In other words, what they're requiring, requesting to do, is not increase the flow of water. It has nothing to do with the water.
What about the parking lot issue?
Pardon me?
What about the parking lot?
Parking lot, it's a huge area, and it was a huge area because they had a lot of traffic. Before your time in Pontiac, Stillwater was a very active business, and they had sales on money, they had a lot of cars. This is a business that's not going to generate a lot of traffic. They're going to have the paved lot. Also, I think in the packet, which was submitted before, there's a site plan. It's going to be have a paved walkway in front of the building. They're doing everything they can to upgrade to make the building attractive for the city and for the business. And remember, it's a landscaping business, and it lends itself to being looking nice.
You will be using asphalt millings instead of gravel.
Any other questions?
Which reduces dust but still is not impermeable, right?
Right, that is correct.
And how many required spaces does he actually have?
There's 6 parking places, and one has to be handicapped accessible, and then we have to keep the handicap.
And actually, Brian, one of the entrances, the one off of Howard Street, is actually a city street.
Yeah, it's and Beth Road.
And Beth Road's out of there.
There's one, it's and Beth Road. 220 by 45 feet, 45 feet, 220 feet long.
And some of the barrier now is going to be dirt and grass as well, right? You're shrinking up the amount of.
Yes, he's soiling and seeding so that way we can create more green space. Where a lot of junk and debris is setting on the property. We've already started a lot of that.
And this has been a very difficult project, or properties even for many, many years after the closing of the sale barn. It's a unique property. There's not a whole lot of uses for it, and it seems as though that this is as good a repurpose as that you could ask for.
Is Tom a landscaper now?
Yes. And he's got a truck, the obviously has trucks because they'll be stored inside. The only thing that might be outside is well, it's going to be outside, the mulching and the gravel. But that's it. Everything else will be inside. And I always say, not that this has anything to do with the request, but I have been in the building, both before Tom Road water and after Tom Road water. You would not leave the looks of the building inside.
It was explained to me once that the idea of retention pond was to keep the water, and I've got one in my place, and Mark Gibbs has one, the Secretary of State has one, that they wanted to retain the water on the west so that the east could drain. That was the rationale that was explained to me.
And it's, development occurs as new runoff that's created by the development. That is minimal. That
Most
most
not
of the
creating any additional runoff.
No, that's what we did. I agree.
Most of the comments that have come up since Tom was over the property have been very favorable. The eyesore type comments have really diminished, and he's cleaned up the area very nicely. Were there any other letters or complaints from the zoning board?
Nobody appeared at the planning commission meeting against it. They set up a matter for the planning commission meeting, and somebody here who would speak in favor of it.
Yes, I am against cementing and the retention pond.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Bradshaw.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Gaver.
No.
Willis.
Yes.
Barr.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck now and for the future. Moving on.
Now we're going to talk about the downtown master plan that we had a public meeting on, public hearing on this afternoon, just kind of a walkthrough, just to see what was proposed. Just wanted to make a few comments before we get into that. The concepts of central business development have been evolving over the past several decades. So back in the urban renewal days, back in the 60s and 70s, it was getting rid of streets and creating malls in downtown areas for them to compete with the malls that were being built on the perimeter of the community. That was a miserable failure. Then in the 1980s, Main Street came along, and there's always been a recognition that the downtowns are the heart of the community, that's the identity of the community, and the Main Street concept focused on the buildings. They said, if you save downtowns, we've got to save the buildings, and in order to do that, we need to make sure that they have economic viabilities. And even through that process now, the Main Street approach is now talking about the focus is on people, getting people downtown. And that's the reason we're kind of bringing life back to the Main Street concept here in Pontiac. And when you start to look at downtown, there's a whole bunch of competing interests. First of all, when you realize that most of these buildings were built between 1880 and 1910, the street conditions were much different than they are today. They were much lower, and so we have some severe elevation problems, which causes problems for accessibility, ADA. There's the conflict between pedestrian traffic and through traffic and business traffic. Then there's a wide range of businesses. When you realize that the vast majority of our independent businesses are downtown, it's also a retail center, and so that's an important fact of a strong downtown. So to address some of these things, we've tried some things in the last couple of years through experiments. The first off, in terms of bringing people downtown, we've really taken a concerted effort of programming activities downtown. This last year, we had much more activity in Block 59. Another aspect was the whole trial of COVID-19 of outdoor dining. That was kind of thrust upon us, but yet that showed the vibrancy that was brought when you get people downtown and developing community. This last year we tried the planters and narrowing down the streets to the one lane, Madison Street, and that was highly successful. So through all these things, we were learning some valuable lessons. And now we're at the point where we're needing to transition from temporary solutions to more permanent solutions. And so we, as staff, have been talking about, we really need to make sure that we take a global approach to this thing and make sure that all the factors are taken in and along development then of a streetscape plan for the downtown area. And this thing was really sped up when the governor announced this fall a substantial grant that's going to be available for communities for downtown redevelopment. So we would want to position ourselves as best as possible to apply for this grant, and there's going to be more grants coming in the future. And so with that, we approached Farnsworth Group. They've done this in other communities. They're very familiar with our community. And they put together, and they've been working hard too, I want to tell you, that they've been on this for just about a month now. And usually the planned time for this is substantially longer, but they really hustled to get this thing out the doors to get us positioned for that grant. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff from Farnsworth Group and let him talk about what they've done. Again, we got great feedback today from those who participated in the open house, and so it's all yours.
Thank you. Well, again, I was here, I think it was about a month ago, and you guys approved the contract for us to do a study for the downtown. And a lot's happened since then, so I wanted to spend tonight, my name's Jeff Martin, I'm an urban planner and a landscape architect with Farnsworth Group. Wanted to give you just kind of an update of where we're at, what we showed the public tonight, and the goal is by January 10th, the grant is due. So between now and then, we're going to polish things up, put together a vision book of downtown. And I think Bob hit on it, is we might be successful in this grant, but it really positions us for future grants. I had a lot of people tonight say, can we build this in 2 years? I said, really, what we're going to show you, this is probably a 20-year plan to do all we want to do, but at least you have a roadmap now for how you want to proceed. So you should have all the PowerPoint or the PDF slides. We can skip the existing conditions, but what we did tonight, before we showed people the specific things we want to do in downtown, we took them through kind of a toolkit of here's some of the things you can do in downtown. The easiest thing that you can do are what we call curb extensions. That's literally moving, if you see on the upper right there, the yellow, that's literally moving the curb out into the street. You're shortening that pedestrian crosswalk, and again, making it more pedestrian friendly downtown. The bottom two photos, that's work we've done in Havana, using simple, bump outs, curb extensions. And again, Bob kind of hit on it. We're trying to get people into downtown. We want to get people to come here, to linger, to hang out, to walk the streets. That's really the focus of what we're trying to do. The other tool we looked at, if you want to look at the slide, is a raised intersection. So here we're doing a curb extension, but then we're taking that whole intersection and we're actually raising it 6 inches. So that whole intersection almost becomes a speed hump. It really slows down traffic. But there's also some fun things you can do in it. This is downtown Plainfield. They actually do some community branding in it. And as you can see, it almost creates this plaza-like area in an intersection. Makes it very pedestrian friendly. You can see on the corner on the bottom right photo, outdoor dining can happen. So a raised intersection is a really unique tool that we can use. Then the final one, and what's happened since I met with you last and we approved our contract, about 2 weeks later we had a working session up here. It was Bob, it was Chris, Brian, Liz was there. We went through different concepts. And I threw out the concept to them of a VUNERF. And I didn't know how it would go over. They actually loved the idea. Long story short, a VUNERF is allowing cars and people to occupy the street. It's Dutch for shared street. So it's a way that we can make those two better commingle. And I'm going to show you how we do that. The image is on the right, the top one, that just shows what a normal street looks like. In the VUNERF concept, we're raising that, like a raised intersection. We're introducing plantings. We're still allowing parking to happen. But again, it's people and cars are all kind of living together in a shared street or a living street is what it translates to. You want to go to the next one. So what we've done, the whole study area, it goes from Division to Chicago, Water, up to Howard Street. So for that entire area, we're recommending curb extensions at every intersection. Again, this is going to take time, but this allows us to get ADA access, ADA
introduce at the top on Main Street, maybe a north gateway. As part of my research through the historical photos that were sent to us, there was a temporary arch that was built behind the statue on the corner of the courthouse. So maybe there's a way we can use that as an inspiration. If we want to have an overhead arch that goes across the road to let people know coming south on Main Street, you're entering downtown Pontiac. The other area where it says South Gateway on Mill Street, we can do an arch down there. We can do columns on the side of the road. When we get to the final master plan, we'll show what those things could look like. And I think the key to all this is not set in stone. Again, we're just trying to provide a framework as you move forward over the years of what you choose to implement and what you can afford to implement. The phase 1 plan, we talked about the raised intersection. I call it 4 corners. We take all 4 corners of the courthouse square. Each of those intersections become raised intersections. And I'll show you an enlargement of what those raised intersections could look like. The raised intersection on the northeast corner, Route 66 at one time when the road was new, ran through there. So the idea, we looked at Plainfield, they did the branding in there. Maybe we could do a Route 66 logo in that raised intersection. Maybe the southwest quadrant, maybe that gets the City of Pontiac logo. Hit the next one. Oh, I want to go back up just one more thing. I think you have another great opportunity. If you look at Block 59 right now, think about it long term. Does that make the most sense the way it's oriented? Right now, you've got open space on the left and parking on the right. If you go to the next slide, the idea is, I'll start on Block 59. What if that reorients? And what if that open space actually happens on the courthouse side? Then all of a sudden you get this great outdoor space. You could have small concerts. The ice rink could drop down right there with the courthouse as a backdrop. And I actually picked up about 7 parking spaces when I laid that out. On phase 2, the only thing we're doing, and I say only, it's a pretty major thing, we're still keeping the 4 corners, but then if you look at Madison Street, the idea of the Vooner happens on Madison Street. And it initially started between Main and Mill Street, and when we had our working session, Bob said, what if we stretch it? Let's do 3 blocks. So we said, let's go from Chicago, and then we work our way over to Plum. That whole thing is the Vooner concept. If you want to hit the slide, let's go to the Vooner one first. Go to the next enlargement. So here's what the Vooner looks like in detail. Again, we're not doing a, Bob mentioned, back in the 70s, pedestrian malls. They would shut down the street, make it all brick pavers, and say, this will work. Well, there was no traffic in it. There was no parking. The Vooner still allows parking to happen. But again, I'm starting to locate trees. We'll start to locate bollards, planters, and there's even the bends in the road, they call those chicanes, to slow down traffic as it's moving through there. So it really creates a very unique space. And you can see on the sidewalk these wonderful spaces for outdoor cafes. We lose a few parking spaces in this scenario, but right now we're losing parking spaces by having to put outdoor dining literally in parking spaces. If you want to back up to enlargement 1, this just shows what a raised intersection could look like. Again, the traffic, there's a dashed line you can see. And for the final master plan, we're going to put final color on these, but I wanted to kind of run this by the public tonight and get people's feedback before we got it too dialed in. On the corners, you've got the great fiberglass bars right now. Those could possibly be located on a couple of the corners. We could also put planters on the corners to keep cars from going up on the sidewalks. But again, it's this idea of kind of creating this plaza and again, slowing down traffic and making downtown much more pedestrian friendly. If you want to jump ahead to enlargement 3, this just shows what that Central Commons could look like. There's a park in South Dakota. We were doing work for the Peoria Civic Center. They wanted to do an ice rink right outside of the Civic Center. And we found this great example in South Dakota where they actually put in an oval-shaped green. And they actually made it out of astroturf because when they put ice rink on it during the wintertime, it would kill the grass. But in the summertime, they use it for
concerts, they do yoga on the green. It literally becomes their village commons. So I just want to put this idea out there. I think you've got a great opportunity here. This then could interface with the intersection at Mill and Washington. There could be a small fountain on the corner. The Christmas tree could happen right in that area. So this thing all builds in itself in a very pedestrian-friendly manner. So I've given you a garden hose and asked you to take a drink, or a fire hose tonight, and asked you to take a drink out of it. But that's kind of where we're at. A lot's happened in the last month. We got great feedback from the public tonight. A lot of people really liked what they saw. Good questions from people. I don't think I have any more slides.
You don't.
Yeah, that's the last one. So the next thing I wanted to share this with you tonight and get any feedback, because then we have to, between now and ideally Christmas, get this wrapped up into an 11 by 17, what we call a vision book, work with Liz, get the grant put together, and then get it sent off.
And again, for the grant, we're talking about the very first phase, which would be probably raising a couple of intersections.
Yes.
And the bump outs that are associated with that. So we don't have to make final jump off the cliff decisions on the Wooner,
Yes.
the parking or Block 59 or any of those things.
Yes.
So phase one is just hitting some of those intersections.
Yes.
Questions for Jeff?
The bike trail, is that been included in this still?
What we find when we start to do the curb extensions is ideally we're calming traffic down where cars and bikes are able to share the road. We might have to do markings on the pavement. You've seen the Sharrow markings, but we don't. I wouldn't want to take up some. You'll see in some communities they actually put in a 5-foot wide bike lane. I'd rather put that into the sidewalk and make the sidewalks wider. So I think the key is to calm traffic down so it's such that cars have to slow and share the road with bicycles.
Do you have initial cost?
No.
Okay.
It's streetscaping can be, right now, we're doing one block of streetscape in Paxton, Illinois. It's about $1 million a block, and there's not a ton of bells and whistles on that. We showed you Havana, that was also about $1 million a block. So again, these things take, when I told people tonight this is a 10 or 20 year plan, it really is. It takes a while to implement this.
And again, at some point, the ball has to start rolling, so that's what we're doing tonight, is getting the first starts in there. And of course, it's all predicated on the applications and the grant monies that we can generate through state and through federal money. Earlier, when I was here listening to people, I had a slight faux pas and I kept calling it grant. It's not grant, it's grant money, so we want to make sure everyone understands that.
And I don't think there's been any discussion about taking motor fuel tax money that we use for the streets throughout the community to plug in here. We have those needs that are out there as well. So this, we look at grants and possibly some TIP funds as time wraps and development stuff.
Well, I think everybody just needs to understand, we're not spending any money tonight, we're not voting on any, we're just seeing a plan that we hope to be able to implement with money that becomes available.
And hopefully, phase one is a couple of raised intersections that goes with that. That is a part of this grant.
Any other questions? All right, move on. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and I'll tee this one up. And as another part of this grant, as we look at the building stock downtown, there's a real issue at the corner of Madison and Main, and that's the Rathbun building, which is on the northeast corner of that intersection. That's a key anchor for the whole downtown area. And so we've been talking with the property owner about acquiring an option that will enable us to apply with this grant for the downtown infrastructure to rehab or begin the rehab of that building. There's asbestos issues, there's window issues, there's elevator issues, and as we have developers coming through looking at that property, they really kind of put the brakes on when they see how much work has to be done up front before they can even start putting any money in for the development of their business. So the concept that we're going to put in the grant is that the city will acquire by exercising this option, and that we'll do that upfront stuff, the windows, the asbestos and that, and get it ready for a developer such that the first dollar that they put into it is for their project. And so that's kind of the plan. We have an option available to us. Alan, you want to just go ahead and hit the highlights of that?
Well, the option didn't get attached to the ordinance that was in the back.
We just got it today, yeah.
Okay, so it was, this option was $145.
Yes.
$145,000 would be the purchase price if the city exercises it. The option would be good through December 31 of 2022, so that's a little over a year. The city will pay $10,000 to acquire the option. If the city exercises the option, the whole $10,000 gets applied to the purchase price. If the city doesn't exercise the option, the owner will refund $5,000 of that. So basically, the city is making a $5,000 option payment that's non-refundable. And that gives the city time to evaluate the costs and funding possibilities and make a good, sound decision about whether to move forward with the purchase of the property. So what an option does, it guarantees you have the right to buy it for a fixed price, and you become just like any other developer to say, hey, is this going to work for you?
And over the past few years, we've had several people show interest in doing a development there. But again, as Bob said, many of them saw the cost to rehab the building as a big no. So we're looking at ways to make this happen in a nice, timely fashion without a lot of expense on our side.
And this grant was a perfect opportunity to take that step.
You're talking about public-private partnerships?
I think kind of the model that we used on Madison Street, that we went in, we pretty much gutted the place, did the tuck pointing, just kind of, the needs are so much greater there. And so what we would do is get that preliminary work done, then put it on the open market and ask for proposals, and not act as the developer, but just sell.
It's one way to assure that what comes in will work with the rest of the community and the development we would be proud to be part of.
Again, I think we had, there's 3 or 4 properties down there, but that's the model we used, and every one of them got sold.
That's a much bigger property.
Yes, yes,
It's much more involved.
yes it is,
Multi-story.
yes it is. But in all likelihood, it's gonna sit there, and every year that goes by, it gets worse. And at some point, that deterioration has to stop, or it's going to be in the street.
Or a private person is looking for help from the city to do the work. And we might as well have more control over the outcome. Either way, there's public entity going into the building. But anybody that grew up like you did in Pontiac, you know, I was in that building many times as a young person, you know, in professional offices and stuff. It's
I think that's a possibility.
and the location is really critical to the downtown.
Make sure the downtown will hold that.
So it ties in well with the previous chronicle presentation. So on this one though, we do need a motion.
There is an ordinance.
There's an ordinance 028, and you're using TIF money, right, Bob?
Yes.
A motion acceptance of the 2021-028.
Motion by Kelly, second by John Miller.
I'll be abstaining.
Roll call please.
Echo,
Yes.
Alice,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Bradshaw,
Yes.
Myers, Willie,
Yes.
Barr,
Yes.
Chilton.
Yes.
Thank you. Now on to some insurance questions.
Yeah. In your packet was the summary of the renewal proposal from our, for lot building, workman's comp, property and auto policies. The increase of about $135,000 when you first look at it is pretty staggering. But the majority of that is, vast majority of that is because of the taking on and starting the ambulance service. That workman's comp is up over $70,000 because of the salaries that are going to be ambulance and fire. And those are the highest classifications for workman's comp. Then also the insurance policy, the fleet was for the three ambulances and the new tandem dump truck. So when you factor that stuff out, the increase was less than 10%. And in our pro formas for the ambulance service, we factored in those work comp rates into our projections. So if our projections hold true, those increases are going to be covered by the ambulance receipts, revenues that are covered. We've been 4+ months now, and because of all of the state requirements, federal requirements, we still don't have a handle. We don't know how many runs we've had. We don't have the breakdown of how many were Medicare, how many were Medicaid, how many were private insurance. And we're working with our billing company to get that. So our preliminary just best guess is that we're going to be pretty close, if not exceeding our projections. And then if that's the case, vast majority of this increase will be covered. So tonight's actions, we need to approve this renewal.
The calls have actually been more than.
The calls have been more. The question is, what is the payer mix of those calls? That if they were all more than what we anticipated, falling in the category of private, no insurance, then we're not going to get as much revenue. If the private insurance, we're going to be way ahead. So until we get an analysis done of exactly the type of payer that we have, preliminary indications are that we're doing good. We've got to get that information before we know exactly where we're at.
But overall, this increase is not terribly outlined.
The municipal markets have been hit hard with COVID and all the other things. On the workman's comp side, all of our, we've had multiple COVID in our police and fire, and all those have been covered by workman's comp. There's been a bump in that. And just the police unrest and all of the things that are going on directly impact insurance.
Any other questions for?
Make a motion to approve the renewal.
I make a motion to approve the renewal.
Motion by Brian,
I'll second.
second by Kelly. Roll call, please.
Ellis,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Bradshaw, Myers, Gabriel,
Yes.
Willie,
Yes.
Barr,
Yes.
Joe Denny,
Yes.
Echo.
Yes.
Thank you. Now we're levy.
Property tax levy, our favorite subject. That time of year, we have to pass a property tax levy. Of course, just as a refresher, we're subject to what's called property tax limitations, PTEL. And so we are limited to the amount of money, new money that can be generated by our property tax levy. It's a 5% increase or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. And so the date that the statute uses for PTEL is a 1.4% increase, which is going to get us around $25,000. We had new construction of about 50,000, which is going to generate another 5,000 or 6,000. So it's a pretty narrow amount that we're going to be able to increase the levy on. If you take the first slide, when somebody gets their tax bill, somehow the default is, this is the city. And actually, the tax bill that's paid by the property tax owners in Pontiac, 20% of that goes to the city. 80% goes to the other taxing bodies. So if we take that then and turn it into dollars, based upon a $4,000 tax bill, of that $4,000, the city gets $800, and the other taxing bodies get $32. Now then, where does that all end up in terms of the city's money? Keep in mind that the city is a non-home rule city, and so we have very specific constraints placed on us by the state. We're a political subdivision of the state, and they basically tell us how we can raise our money and where it is to be spent. So if we look at this next bill, the pension funds, the retirement funds are property tax based. And so when you look at that $800 that's generated by the property tax, 88% of that goes to retirements and liability insurance that we just talked about the item before. The retirements are the police pension fund, the fire pension funds, IMRF, and Social Security. And again, all of those benefits, all of the funding requirements are established by the state. Next one. In terms of dollars, we're going to probably take in around 2.5 million, a little over 2.5 million. So 2.2 million is going to go to the retirements, the liability insurance, and the general, and 262,000 to operations. Again, on a general fund runs about a $7 million budget, and 260,000 of that comes from property tax. And the other funds, such as the audit fund, municipal gain, are at 36,000. So as we look at that levy ordinance, there's not a whole lot of flexibility in it. That the bulk of it is the property tax, or the retirements, and the liability insurance. In your packet were two separate two levy ordinances. The one compared the extension of the different levies for 2020, and the second column to the right is what I proposed. Now keep in mind the pension funds, we were told by the State Department of Insurance what we had to levy. And tonight we saw the liability insurance, of what we have to levy for. You'll notice that the levy for that 735 that we had talked about as our cost. Because again, we're anticipating that a good chunk of that increase is going to be covered by ambulance revenues. So liability insurance is up 40,000. That has a deficit, so we're trying to chop away at that. Police pension is actually down 18.5, and fire pension is up 35,000. That's what the state said that we needed to do. So there's a little cushion in there in case the number changes. Again, we are limited as to what that will ultimately generate based upon the PTEL. Also within our levy ordinance is the library levy, but when they figure PTEL, they do that independently, and they're not affecting either. So this is the first time you've seen this. If you want to digest it for a couple of weeks and approve it at the next meeting, we can certainly do that. I don't know what else we would do, but it's certainly your pleasure.
Any other questions for Bob on this? We really don't have much.
There- there-
I'm sorry, I'm just curious, what are the other taxing bonds?
District 429, District 90, Livingston County, Pontiac Township, Heartland Community College. I think that's it. Yeah.
Any discussion you want to delve into? Because I don't think we have a lot of choices to return form. So we can approve it tonight or wait a couple weeks.
It has to be filed by the 28th of December, or Tuesday. And we approve it at the next meeting, which is the 20th.
But certainly,
Let's do it, we just want to cross the street.
and again, we just got the liability numbers last week is the reason that we wait on pensions and we wait on liability insurance, and those just recently came in and great.
Does anybody see any reason why we wait 2 weeks?
I don't.
I make a motion that we accept Bob's proposal.
I'll second.
Motion by Kelly, seconded by Brian. Roll call, please.
Lee,
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Bradshaw.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Gaber.
Yes.
Willie.
Yes.
Barr.
Yes.
Joe
Yes.
Echo.
Yes.
Callis.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris, you get Bob to sit down for a few minutes and rest himself. Chris is going to talk to us about push plow.
Good evening. We had budgeted for this fiscal year to purchase a man lift with a trailer for various jobs, both with the building crew and our crew. As with everything nowadays, it's everybody has for sale is $1 million, and sometimes those machines aren't worth buying. So we just have a hard time finding a machine that would be good for the city and within our budget. So we kind of talked about what other needs do we have. And one item that we were going to pursue next budget year was a second pusher plow for our snow operations. It would be primarily used downtown and cleaning up city parking lots. By adding a second pusher unit, it would reduce the number of trucks needed downtown probably by half. We can put those trucks on the street plowing. We typically run 4 to 5 pickup trucks downtown and 1 pusher, so adding a second pusher would eliminate the need to have all the trucks downtown. This year we budgeted $50,000 for that man lift and trailer. Pusher plow will be considerably less than that. We saw 2 prices. One from DI Equipment of Beecher, Illinois, who submitted a quote of $16,095. And then we got a price from Clean Cut Landscaping of Kankakee, and their quote came in at $15,835.
Yes, it's a 14-foot wide plow. It's a sectional blade. The one we have now is a solid blade, more rubber based, where this will be a steel plow, which will, I think there's 6 or 7 sections that go across that plow, and it moves up and down with obstacles in the road. Should allow for clean removal, which will help with Pontiac salt when we go to salt afterwards.
How does it work with raised intersections?
I'm sorry?
Does it work with raised intersections?
We'll find out. They actually offered us a 17-footer, and that'd be a little too much to have downtown. I don't see a problem. Taking care of that.
There's really no difference between the two machines, I mean.
Oh, they're the exact same thing. Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions? We need a motion to
So moved. Just
moved by John, second by Kurt. To purchase the equipment. Roll call, please.
Higgs,
yes.
Bradshaw,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Gaber,
Yes.
Lilly,
Yes.
Barr,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Echo,
Yes.
Callis,
Yes.
Lee.
Yes.
Thanks, Chris. You guys are doing a great job on leaf removal too, by the way. I know we hear complaints, but it's going well. We appreciate all the efforts.
Thank you.
I want to talk about the employee Christmas gifts. In the past, we've been gifts to full-time employees, $50 cash, part-time, paid on call, volunteer time, $25 each. I would propose that we continue that process. If you need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Motion by Don Hicks, second by Jason Lee. Roll call, please.
Bradshaw,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Gaber,
Yes.
Lilly,
Yes.
Barr,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Echo,
Yes.
Callis,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Okay. Bob, that's a short enough.
Yeah. At the end of this month, I'll be finishing my 40th year as city administrator here in Pontiac. And, I'll tell you a little story. That it was New Year's Eve, 1981. We'd been following the moving van from Kansas City. And we hit town about 6:30 in the morning, and I said to my wife Susan, "We're here." And she had the question of the ages. She says, "Are we going to be here long?" And I said, 5 years max. I can guarantee it, 5 years max. Because that's pretty much the progression of people in this profession. And the one thing that we didn't know about then, which I really believe that. I wasn't just telling her because that's what I thought she wanted to hear. Because that was the path of the profession. The one thing we didn't know is how difficult Pontiac is to do. After that 5 years, I started interviewing. We'd go to these places and say, why would I want to go here when I've got Pontiac? And so Pontiac, over a period of time, really became one. Then, within the last few years, evidently I'm starting to look old because I've had a lot of people ask me, why aren't you retiring? And the answer was pretty simple, because I love what I'm doing. I'm doing it with super people. As you look at these department heads that we have a really strong management team. You guys are incredible, the way you support our operation. Great employees, great citizens, some really exciting things have been happening in the last few years. And love what I do. But having said all that, it is time to retire. And so I plan on retiring in 2022. Two aspects of this announcement tonight. The first one is this will enable the city council to start the process of starting to find my replacement. The second aspect is I'm not putting a date on it because I've committed to the council. I've committed to the community that I'm going to make sure that this transition is as seamless as possible. So however how long that takes, I'm here. So, having said that, Mayor, this is not my final goodbye, so if I can have the podium one more time before I walk out the door, I'll end it now. Except, I do want to say one thing, that I'm going to be insanely jealous of whoever gets to do this job.
As a side note to that, we ordered his birthday cake for next year already. So that would be the idea of the night. Actually, on the agenda here, council needs to consider consulting firm. We've got a contract proposed for a 3-phase process to assist us in recruitment and selection of the city administrator. HR based in Northbrook, Illinois, provides customized executive recruitment services to public sector entities across the country. We've met with Mark Peterson, former city manager of the town of Norman, current vice president of HR USA, specializing in city and county administration, and he would be the project manager. I believe, along with the council and Mr. Peterson, we will be of great assistance, and he will offer his professional guidance as we go through the process of filling the city administrator position, which is not going to be filled tomorrow. But we do need to approve a contract with the firm to assist us in this process and give us, again, we're just getting the ball rolling. We're not actually kicking a field goal, trying to score 3 points. So, need a motion to accept the proposal we've seen from Northbrook and go from there. Motion by Mike, second by Brian Gaber. Roll call, please.
Myers?
Yes.
Gabriel?
Yes.
Lilly?
Yes.
Barr?
Yes.
Jovinetti?
Yes.
Eckhoff?
Yes.
Callis?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Hicks?
Yes.
Bradshaw?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would just say, we love what you do, but you also make a difference. And that's what really matters, so we really appreciate your service.
There'll be some big shoes, that's for sure.
I think, I'll just use the expression, following the pledge many times. This would be really the case here. So, but we haven't got there yet. It was a little lot. Mayor's comments. I'd just like to congratulate the entire city staff on a great effort. Last Friday's light up parade and tree lighting kickoff. Just a fabulous job. I'm very proud. I heard estimates. We wondered if people know how to count. But there was a lot of people, and it was a great time for all. So Taylor, Liz, Mary, everybody did a great job. Chris's crew worked diligently to get everything ready. It was really well done. So thank you again. It's a great effort. I think the only other thing that I really had to talk about is, I think we need to have an infrastructure meeting.
Yeah, we, Brian and Chris have pretty much got a proposal ready for street work for next year. So we'd like to meet next week so that we can get it down for 2 weeks. So because the new process is getting these projects approved in the state has really taken a lot of time as we've seen this year. So we want to get as head start as possible. So next week's availability, John, you're up.
Back Tuesday afternoon.
Wednesday,
Wednesday,
4:30.
the 15th, 4:30. Who else is out of interest? 4:30 work for you on Wednesday the 15th? Okay, we'll book it.
Yeah, that's sounds great. Other than, enjoy the holiday season as it's coming up. Again, it's been an unusual year, but things have rolled along pretty well. And we've done a lot of things that I didn't think we'd ever do. We're doing well with it. Plus the effects of that. So, city council comments.
I just had a question, probably to Liz. How are the little shops doing?
So there are 2 tenants in there, and when I checked with them, they seem to be doing okay. Yeah. They're both really thrilled with the space and excited and looking forward to it.
What was the, I guess this goes to Taylor, ice rink?
So I'm so conflicted on this because I hate winter, and it's just not really good for ice conditions right now, especially with 50. So we've completely drained the ice rink. If we were to leave those 4 inches of waters in there, I'm sure but it'd take a lot longer to freeze. So once we have the forecast to where we see it's pretty much 30s and below after that, then we're going to fill it back up slowly again, basically just restart.
I think it's important, when we bought this, we talked about good up to 50 degrees. That is, 50 degrees doesn't get the ice down. The chillers aren't that strong. So we got to get the ice, and then the chillers help maintain that. So that's kind of where we're at.
I was going into the structure itself.
Oh, okay.
We had to upgrade that to support a Zamboni.
So we went a different route. I was able to work out with work a deal out with a guy up in Vermont where he actually sells an ice mower, and it's a modified version of a push mower that has a special blade on that. So we're able to get a different type of piece of equipment on the rink that will be able to be supported by the existing deck.
And we've also got it hooked up where we can do our maintenance with hot water, which is much preferable than the cold water. So.
Yes, we worked with Chris and Rick and Stuart on finding some different options for that hot water. That's going to be a lot better maintenance-wise for us this next year.
No, we'll get some cold weather.
I know, me too, but I don't, but I do.
Yeah. City administrator.
I've said enough.
Yeah.